if anything happens to like your mic's connection, it will stop recording.
Right.
And I am infamous for slapping my own microphone. So I will get fired up in a discussion, slap the shit out of my own microphone, and then cause it to come unplugged.
Amazing.
Which will end
Audacity,
the
because it's
recording.
Because it's like, no microphone, I'm done. I guess we're over now.
I guess we're done. And so I will occasionally look at it and realize that my having slapped the mic has caused the recording to stop.
Monica, the slapper of microphones. The slayer of Audacity.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new bonus experience series. I don't know if I love the way that sounds. Margaret will work on it. Friend of the show and repeat guest Danielle Lauzon has signed on with us to do a however many episode we feel like series where the two of us go deep on one mechanical topic.
Deep.
It's in italics on my script. Come on, man. As always, we are two queer women speaking with authority about games. And yes, we will still swear. So if you have a problem with that, you can still go die.
Die mad about it.
Die mad about it, yes, correct.
Please go and die and be mad about it while you do it.
I'm Monica.
I'm Danielle.
Yeah, I'm BXP's regular host, Exalted Essence Mechanical Developer, in case you're tired of me saying that in every episode. And regular freelancer for the Onyx Path. You want to flex on some of your cred here?
Oh man. I'm Danielle. I'm a regular freelance developer and designer for Onyx Path Publishing. I am a freelance author for several other game companies. And I write games. And I spend all day thinking about games.
That's your job.
It's literally
that's your
my
whole job.
That's my whole existence. That and cleaning the house. Actually, my job is feeding this fat cat that I have named Leo. Yeah.
I also have a fat cat who's my responsibility to feed.
Mm-hmm. Next time, fat cats. Yeah, why we love them.
A deep discussion on fat cats. Fat cats and why we love them.
We pretty much have to say deep that way every day.
Deep.
Hey.
So both Terry and Rob are really fond of catching the weird chaotic shit I say out of context and then turning it into a soundbite and then sending it to me.
Oh yeah, I have several hilarious sound bites from both of them.
So Julia has started to play this game in real life where she stops me in the middle of conversation and goes, "That's the thing Terry would turn into a soundbite."
Amazing. So good.
So today in our deep discussion is we're gonna talk a lot about social system mechanics and using things to direct conversation and like really focusing on that because I played Bluebeard's Bride recently.
Yeah,
which is a really good game. It's perfect for the Halloween season.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
See, I think I want to start off by talking about Bluebeard's Bride and what I thought it was and what I got. Like that meme that's like what I thought, what I expected, what I got. Like
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
So I actually thought it would kind of be more depressing. Oh, you have the physical. Oh, it's such a fucking gorgeous book.
Let's just moon over this book that no one else can see but us.
Right. Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
For our audience at home, you do owe it to yourself to buy a hard copy because it's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. I'm going to say this, and I just recently bought Merkborg, which you probably heard me talking about.
I want a copy of Merkborg too.
This is probably the most visually stunning, beautiful book I have ever put on my bookshelf in any way, shape, or form.
Bluebeard's Bride is beautiful. Morkborg is stylish.
Yes, Morkborg is sexy, stylish. It's, looks like a metal album cover. Bluebeard's Bride is like stunning, and even while you read it, you're like, oh man, this is just beautiful. Like every image is evocative. Even the layout is, it's masterful. We'll talk more about that. Maybe I might like gush over how much I love Bluebeard's Bride. But I'm gonna let Monica talk about what she thought she was getting.
Yeah. So I thought it was going to be like, the way people describe it, I thought it was going to be a lot more depressing. Mm-hmm. Like, because it does seem pretty bleak. Like, the elevator pitch is pretty bleak. Where you're like, yeah, you play the wife of a serial killer and your only way to win is to die. And they're like, if you put it that way, it sounds kind of terrible. And so, like, that was really kind of the rundown that I had gotten. And I was sort of like, I don't know that I want to buy into that. That sounds a little awful. But I'm sure it's for someone, probably not for me. And then Chaz was like, hey, do you want to play in an actual play that we're going to do for the story told? And I almost said no, but I was like, you know what? Don't be a fucking coward. Just do it. Find out. If you dislike it, you never have to play it again. Right? Like, if I play this game and I don't enjoy it, well, then I won't buy it. Right? I will continue to not own it. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no better way to give it a try than with, like, some people you know, and, like, for free, which is what I got to do. And it was a really good time. Like, someone was like, I think this is my new favorite RPG, and I'm not sure I'm going to give it that quality, but it was excellent. So I was pleasantly surprised to discover that it isn't sort of a misery tourism type thing, but it is in fact perfectly tuned to tell a ghost story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know, like, the story that it's based on.
I do, sort of, yeah.
Okay. So the Bluebeard story is a ghost story in its essence. It's a very gothic horror style ghost story, though, right? Yeah. And when I say gothic horror, I will talk a lot about how, like, Vampire the Masquerade is gothic horror, but this is what I really mean by gothic horror. It's what was that new movie that just came out? Something, Crimson Peak.
Yes.
Gothic horror is described as a genre where the horror comes from this kind of, like, very personal, but, like, the things that people do to each other. And you are haunted by the remnants of usually, like, dead wives or dead relatives or dead, like, other people that have been wronged by someone in the story. And the gothic horror of it is this kind of internal, maybe everybody in the story isn't a good person, and usually the story is being told from the innocent's point of view. The innocent learns about the horrible choice that they've made by buying into this horrible person, and here are all the dead people coming to essentially try to save this innocent person,
right,
by haunting them and scaring them away. And then usually they end up, like, dying because gothic horror does not end necessarily well.
Right.
But it's beautiful. It's often very beautiful and very personal. And so, the story of Bluebeard is, this woman marries this man. He's married a bunch of women. He's very rich. She is poverty stricken. She's marrying him to help out her family because he's got this large dowry he's going to pay to her family. And then when she gets there, she is given free reign of the house to wander around and look through the house, except for one room that is forbidden to her. She cannot resist the temptation. She looks in the room. She finds out he's a serial murderer, and then he kills her for finding out his secret, which is very gothic. Like, yes. That, like, right. And, it's that forbidden knowledge. It's that, and some of it is like, what has she got herself into? And how innocent is she truly for having, everybody knew that this guy had, like, 10 wives and they all disappeared mysteriously and nobody once thought that maybe he was fucking murdering them? Or did you think that and then go, but the money was more important?
Right.
Right. So, there's some things to think about there of, like, what is the lesson from this story?
Right. So for the people who are listening to this who may have only gotten the bad elevator pitch that I got.
Sure.
So in this game, you and all the people who are playing like aspects of the bride's psyche. And so the 3 to 5 of you are, like, basically the own conversation that happens in your own head when you're dealing with a tense situation. And they all are sort of reflective of the way society treats women.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, they are. And my favorite thing is that each of these members, characters are called sisters.
Yes.
So you're not shards of a psyche or anything.
Right.
You're their, you're this person's internal monologue, but they're all each other's sisters, which is such an interesting thing because it defines a dynamic between them immediately.
Right.
Right. When you think about how do you treat your sister, how do you feel about your sister, right? Even if you don't have any siblings, you can think about that kind of sibling familial love of like, you don't always agree with them, but you may not even get along with them, but they're still your family and they're still close to you. You don't necessarily need to have the same personality. You don't need to necessarily feel the same way about everything you see. And it's such a great way to describe the dynamic between these parts of the psyche because they're all part of the same woman, but they have that kind of familial relationship where it's, I don't necessarily agree with your assessment right now, sis.
So each one is basically a playbook done in the PBTA style.
Yes.
It's really condensed down because Bluebeard's bite is
Yes.
so focused, and that's kind of one of the things we want to talk about mechanically in this deep dive. And then each one of you describes a physical aspect of the person who you all are. Like the witch gets to describe her hair, the fatale is her mouth, the animus is her hands. I'm not looking at this. I'm doing this from memory. Danielle has the book in front of her.
I'm looking at their moves right now and not the playbooks themselves.
Anyway, someone else is the eyes, someone's the body, and like they all have, and then like all PBTA games, you have questions you answer, and the groundskeeper, which is the name for the GM or the facilitator in this game, in the game that I played, added extra questions that she made up on the fly, and they were all really good stingers. So I can't wait for this episode to come out and for you all to hear the extra things she asked, because they really help set the tone. Like, the person who ran this game blew it out of the fucking water.
Yeah.
I was very impressed. And so I played the witch, which I thought sounded at first like maybe would get a little bit supernatural, but I like read through the moves and stuff, and I was like, actually, this is sort of reflective of like being the part of your brain that sort of goes against, that transgresses against like what society expects of a woman.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when we were playing this game, when everybody else, like, one of the questions all of you have to answer when you're doing this thing that also is a mechanic that sets the tone for this gothic horror game, is that everybody has to answer from the point of view of their aspect. Do you trust your husband? Like, do you think he's a good guy who's maligned by these vicious rumors, or is he in fact awful? And everybody else was like, yes, we trust him. They're just being mean. And I was like, no. Blue is sus.
Who's sus? Amazing.
I also really had to control my desire to crack wise because I didn't want to break the scary tension.
Yes.
And I leaned into this whole, like, the witch is like her desire for being like a man, in air quotes, like wanting to learn and wanting to make money and wanting to have financial independence, and like that maybe the bride could have actually had a chance at real freedom through, financial savvy, because she had some skill at being a merchant, and maybe she could have been like a wife of Bath figure, but nope, we're here now. So my answer was basically like, no, he's sketch as fuck. Nope, you don't offer an open-ended deal like that. Much like if something is free, you're the product. So,
right.
And I thought that was like a real fun way to approach that. But yeah, so like those questions open up that kind of interpretation and immediately focus the conversation of the game towards this story that we're going to tell. And I really would like to talk about how this game is a fucking masterclass in how dice rolls do not need to be involved in good mechanics.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about the things that Bluebeard Brides does, in my opinion, that make this about us telling a ghost story, right?
Yeah.
And like essentially, this game is so focused, and something I think Powered by the Apocalypse, a lot of people talk about Powered by the Apocalypse. It's a great system, blah, blah, blah. But I think what Powered by the Apocalypse's biggest, like, hallmark, its biggest strength is that it is really good at driving down and narrowing down to a very focused game in which you pick specific moves, you pick specific aspects, you pick specific things, all to tell a very, very narrow and specific story. And so if your game is narrow and specific, Powered by the Apocalypse as a system is a really great framework to hinge that on. And, you know, I would even call Bluebeard's Bride is Powered by the Apocalypse, but it's so Powered by the Apocalypse light.
Yes, it's super light.
Because it is really about telling a collaborative ghost story. It is everybody sits around the table and we're telling this very specific ghost story, and we're telling it together, and it's got some rules on how to dictate that conversation, but really it is constantly a conversation.
Yeah. So this goes back to something I have shaken my fist about in other episodes. I think it was in the Mechanics Are Inevitable episode, which pause, go listen to it, come back now that you're back. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Where I say that, like, if I write a rule that directs how conversation happens, that is still a mechanic, even if we're not rolling dice. Like, I see a lot of Twitter discourse where folks are like, my game is about kissing and it doesn't have any mechanics. And I'm like, well, if you told me how I'm supposed to interact with my other players about how we get around to the kissing, then your game sure as fuck has a mechanic.
Yes.
Like, and so I want to talk about this because Bluebeard's Bride has mechanics. It has plenty of them. Mm-hmm. They are just focused on directing conversation.
Right. And there is some rolling.
There is some rolling.
I mean, there's some rolling with some of the moves, but even those rolls, the random chance or whatever isn't, it's interesting because it's to see whether or not you succeed, which a lot of games roll that way, but a lot of it is just to kind of find out what happens, and not like in a succeed, don't succeed kind of way. And I will, lots of Powered by the Apocalypse does that already, right? You know, like sometimes when you're rolling, it's not because you're like, oh, did I hit? And it's like, you know, you did. It's to see how well or really what happens because you took this action. And I think a lot of the rolling in Bluebeard's Bride is made that way. Like, what is the result of the thing that you did? You're not going to fail to do the thing ever. Mm-hmm. We're just rolling to see what the results are.
Yeah, I think the things you roll for, because I have a little printout of the moves, because I was trying not to be that player who's like, I don't know what's going on in the AP, so I printed off everything. Sometimes I'm courteous, but not always. Yeah. You roll to caress a horror, which is something that can, in fact, go horribly wrong. You roll to cry out for help and dirty yourself with violence, and the rest are all just conversation.
Right, and even the individual playbook moves are all conversational. I don't think any of those are rolled. I'm not sure.
The witches sure aren't, but I didn't print out the rest of them.
Yeah, I'm looking at them online right now because, like, as per most. So anyway, you know, I want to talk about two specific moves in Bluebeard's Bride that I think are just masterful.
Go for it.
The first one is Propose a Truth.
Okay.
And this is it's an exit move.
Let's take a brief aside and talk about what that means.
Right. Yeah. So there's 3 types of generic moves that you can make in this game. There are maiden moves, which literally anyone can take at any time during the game table they often either deal with how you're investigating the room that you're in or deal with each other. So you can care for somebody in the room or one of the other characters or whatever. There's other things that you can do. But maiden moves can be done at any time by anyone. There are ring moves. So the game has a ring, which is the wedding ring. And whoever is in control of the ring at the time can make ring moves. And one of the ring moves is to give up the ring and hand it off to somebody else. So you can always make a move to just pass the ring on to one of the other, sisters and let them make a ring move instead. And whoever's holding the ring is the face at the moment of the bride as she is investigating or whatever. And then exit moves are moves that happen, and I may get this wrong, but they're the end of game moves, kind of.
Basically, you explore through I'll pick it up from here. I have it in
Sure.
front of me. So you explore through the house because the whole thing is that like, or the person who ran our game, I don't know if this is a house rule or just their take on it, was the ring is the ring of keys because you're exploring the house.
Yeah, it can be that as well.
That's how we played it in our game. So
yeah,
which I thought was very thematic, but whatever. So like the ring is the mechanic to control who's leading the conversation, and we'll get into that more in a bit. But you're exploring through this house, and you're supposed to basically like look through a bunch of rooms before you get to the last room, which is of course where the game ends. And I suppose that depending on how much time you have to play, there can be an indefinite number of rooms until you get to the end. But whenever you enter a room, you have to contend with its horrors and whatever other creepy stuff is in there. And so, like, it's basically a spook after a spook after a spook, and then it has an ending. At any time you want to leave a haunted room, and pro tip, they're all haunted, you have to make an exit move.
Exit move, right. Right,
so
okay.
Propose the truth.
Right, so there's only 2 exit moves to leave a room. You can either just escape, blip, 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 I'm gone, I ran away, it was scary. Or you can propose a truth. And when you propose a truth, what you're doing is you're kind of creating a fiction, a detail. You're describing, like, based on, you saw all these spooks, you saw this scary stuff, like dead bodies, skeletons, bloody handprints, whatever you saw. And now you say what you think happened in the room and who it happened to, why it happened. And this is the truth. And essentially is the bride who is contextualizing the thing she just saw. And so there's 2 different ways to contextualize. You contextualize it as, well, I mean, I know it looks bad, but he didn't actually like bash in his ex-wife head with a candlestick. She fell and knocked the candlestick over, and he found her that way, and you know, he loved her, and he didn't murder her, and this is what I think happened here. Or you can be like, oh shit, he murdered someone here. And if you decide that, oh no, this is a mistake, like we are mistaking what we're seeing here, this was an accident, this was truly just a bad pitfall to this person who is now my husband, you take a token of faithfulness. And if you're like, oh no, my husband's a murderer, then you take a token of disloyalty, and then you leave that room. And so you collect these tokens of essentially the bride convincing herself either that, oh no, I am suspicious of my husband and he's scary, or contextualizing everything that happens in a way that proves that he's innocent to you. And other, you know, when you're making an exit move, one person makes it, and you're proposing the truth, one person makes it. But again, it's collaborative. The sisters can say, like, I don't think that that's what happened. And then they kind of discuss.
Or your whole group can be like, it's fine. And the voice, the like intuition in the back of your head, who was me the whole time, be like, bitch, no, this is bad. Oh my god, I had so much fun being the point of intuition, because you know, sometimes when you're in a bad situation, like you want to convince yourself, like your intuition is like, bitch, no, this is bad, and the rest of you is like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, she just fell down the stairs, it's fine, nothing is wrong. Like,
he didn't push her, he wasn't anywhere near,
he wasn't even home. There's a perfectly logical explanation for the splatter of brain across the carpet.
The gun went off in her hand.
Right. We're sort of making light of it. Our GM went like, do you remember the cheesy movie from the late 90s called The Haunting?
Yes.
Where like, it's not terribly scary, but like the whole thing is about like the house coming alive and attacking people, and I loved the shit out of that.
Yeah.
And it sort of spooked me in a fun way. I love that sort of like almost surreal.
The house is the malicious one.
Yeah. That like almost surreal sort of thing, and then it ends in just a totally gonzo ghost fight at the end. Like that whole thing, that idea is just so my shit. But the GM ran the house being haunted like that, as opposed to like every room is a murder scene.
Right. No, yeah, I mean, and it's not just a murder scene, it's a haunting, right? So you may see like a woman, like a ghost or something along those lines, and like trying to figure out what is this ghost's purpose, like why is she spooking me right now?
Yeah, like the GM went straight to like true surreal magic. Like,
I like
this room is physically changing right now because it's so haunted, like which is a different tone than
every room's a murder scene.
Every room's a murder scene. Like,
Right.
I don't know what the book tells you to do because I don't own it. Or does it not?
It does. It gives you some suggestions, and every room is got these great. So let's see. The groundskeeper chapter is maybe longer than like the regular chapter.
The rest of the book.
Yeah. But there's something about curating the rooms,
mm-hmm.
and then there's some room threats
mm-hmm.
That are based around like the thing that could be, you know, there's 4 different things: body, motherhood, religion, and sexuality.
Right.
And then there's subsets of those. And then there are some moves that the room makes.
Okay.
And there's lists of them. And, you know, like we'll talk about body for a moment. This includes the many ways the world tells the women that they are broken and worthless and that their only value is in their appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Some subsets of body are beauty standards, disability, eating disorders, gender, and illness. Some room moves, things that the room may do to the bride: drug her, perform a medical procedure, shame her by introducing a perfect woman, paper the room with what society demands, showcase a flaw for all to see, exhibit consequences of a transgressive woman, give her the tools she needs to be beautiful, tempt her with gems, clothes, or delectable delights, bind her body in satin and silk, make her hair, teeth, or fingernails fall off. So, yes, in essence, the rooms themselves are haunted in a way that, you know, while the room is making the move, it could be, you know, there could be a threat or a thing in there that does those things, right?
Right.
But in a very real way, the rooms themselves are malicious towards the bride.
Okay, so hearing that whole list makes a lot of the GM's choices make sense, because I believe someone had put on our list of lines and veils, because we did all of that like in a chat ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Someone had vetoed the drugging one, and then I believe someone else vetoed like self-harm.
There's in the sexuality list, you know, there's stuff like abortion and things like that. So honestly, this is a game that you absolutely 110% like it like describes the X card in the mechanics of the game as an important tool for playing this game. But honestly, you could go through the room moves and use it as a lines and veils of like, I don't ever want a room to do this to me.
Right.
Like I just can't. And that would, you know, a valid way to go through before you play this game.
Yeah. We obviously were given a link to like the PDF and stuff, but I don't think anybody, at least I didn't, maybe other people did, read through that room list. We just put down stuff that like generally makes us uncomfortable. And so a couple of those ruled out room moves, but certainly left plenty to be scary with.
Yes. Oh yeah. There's so much. I mean, there's just so much. And so that moves me on to my other favorite move. That this is a ring move, and I know that your game changed it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But it is called Shiver from Fear. And I often, like, I made this joke to Mark whenever he was telling me about it, that this makes this game a LARP. I mean, it's already sitting around like it's already a game about sitting around a campfire and telling a ghost story, which is in its own way kind of a LARP. But Shiver from Fear is when you shiver from fear, name a thing you are most afraid will happen, and the groundskeeper will tell you how it's worse than you feared. Then you can either keep the ring or and choose like a thing based on that fear, or you can pass the ring and only choose one thing. And so as a way you can pass the ring and move on. And then the Shiver from Fear is literally you as a player are afraid of what's about to happen. It is when the groundskeeper has described something so creepy that you're like, oh no, what's about to happen? I'm shivering from fear. It's a meta move, and it's amazing.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the house rule that we played with for a sec, because it was an interesting modification of that rule before we move on to like why I wanted to talk about Bluebeard's Bride so badly, besides that it's a good game. But so in our game, the GM... So, like, that's a ring move, and so when you have the ring, you're sort of the person who's moving the action forward. You're in the spotlight, right? And then I want to talk about the ring and all that in a little bit. But, so the GM opened Shiver from Fear to everyone, not just...
The ring bearer.
The ring bearer, which does allow someone else to be like, nope, my turn now.
Yeah.
Which is a cool way to like make that pass a little easier. I
Mhm.
think that's the making that become the way with which you engage with the story and like maybe break the ice and help people buzz in basically to
Right.
say, hey, I
Right.
want to play now I think that was a good change.
Yeah, especially if, if the thing that is being described or whatever makes literally someone else who is not the ring bearer, like, is freaking out right now,
Yeah.
like, letting them describe what they are afraid will happen will then drive the story forward.
Hmm.
And so I do think that that's a good house rule. When you told me about it, I was like, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason, and because it allows you to change the ring's hands, that is why it is a ring move.
Hmm.
But honestly, having that available for anyone to be like, I'm freaking out, is just great.
Yeah. And the GM also specifically told us, we had a conversation about it, and the GM also specifically told us one that you didn't necessarily have to be terrified. You could also simply be excited that something bad was going to happen.
Yes.
And if at any point in time you were like, oh, we're so fucked, like that was when you were supposed
Yeah.
to shiver with fear.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like that's the spirit of that move,
It
right?
is,
Because
it
you're
is.
not always literally shivering, but you're
Right.
just going to be like, oh no. And when it's like, what do you knowing about? Like, oh, we're about to open this door and this thing's about to happen. Oh, it sounds like you're shivering from fear because you literally did the mechanic of that. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I am afraid this is about to happen, guys, is literally shiver from fear, which is why I like that's such a masterful move. But it also asks you to be really invested in the game.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
have to be invested in what's about to happen, even if you're not scared by it, but you need to be invested in what's about to happen and what's going on to even start like pre-thinking that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so that discussion about like anytime you're like, oh shit, we're so fucked, or whatever, you have that sort of like, oh god, feeling was because one of the people, and myself included, were like, I'm not really the sort of person who gets jumpy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably not gonna say something that scares me so badly that I physically react to it, right? Like,
Sure.
but we talked about it. And we were like, no, we'll just don't you, the groundskeeper, guess when
Mhm.
I'm scared. I will tell you.
Yeah.
And so like we established that as a rule that like people could basically just like buzz in and be like, I'm shivering with fear. Like,
Yes.
oh shit.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great, and when we talk about this being a game and a masterclass of driving a story forward without rolling, without
Right.
randomization,
Mhm.
this is probably the number one way that this happens. Now every playbook has a group of like faces, essentially, which is the move that your group move or whatever, or your playbook move,
Your face move, that's what that's
your
called.
face move.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of different faces. There's 3 per playbook, and each one is, I'll just read off Animus because it's the first one in the list, because alphabetically. It's when you investigate a mysterious object by breaking it, ask a follow-up question about the object. Like, that's it. There's no rolling. You break the object because you're
Right.
the Animus,
Mhm.
and you're a little fighty maybe, and then you get to ask another question about it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so that's it. That's the move. And so you're driving the story forward by maybe remove, because that now the object is removed and no one else can investigate it. You got your extra question, but now nobody else can ask questions. Another one is a shield. When one of your sisters marks trauma, explain to her how the trauma she is experiencing is her fault. Then ask if she believes you. If she believes you, she marks 1 less trauma. If she rejects your explanation, mark 1 trauma as you experience the shame of your own impotence. Right? So it's like, hey, I need you to internalize that trauma. But it's such a great, and this is, lots of playbook moves in PBTA kind of work this way, where it's very specific. Like, when you do this very specific thing, get this very specific result. But these are very geared towards, understanding trauma and doing this kind of ghost story thing where you maybe make bad decisions to try to get good results.
Right. Yeah. So like, yeah. I want to talk about the ring moves and the maiden moves and
Mhm,
how they
mhm.
got me thinking about, like, obviously all these moves are tuned towards telling a specific ghost
Yeah,
story,
yeah.
which got the designer brain turning
Of course.
to being like, well, what if we wrote a social system? What if social systems in more traditional games, because you and I both work on some pretty
Mhm.
fucking traditional games.
We sure do.
Sure do. Which, like, could benefit from learning from creating question askers
Yes.
that direct conversation in a very specific way and don't require rolling.
Right. Yeah. So if you're familiar, for listeners, if you're familiar with most PBTA games, there's usually a question asker, like, taking stock of a situation or investigating. They're question askers, but usually you roll, on a hit, you get to ask one, on a 10 plus, you get to ask two, maybe on a miss, you get some bad information.
Right.
It's often how those are formulated. In Bluebeard's Bride, all of those question askers are you just fucking ask those questions. Like, you
Right.
do this move, you ask some questions.
So let me read our audience investigate a mysterious object, which is one of the moves that literally anyone can take.
Mhm.
And so, as we've described, this is a game about parading through this terribly haunted house
Mhm.
and finding these horrible things that are going to scar you permanently. Which, again, I'm making it sound really terrible, and it's not.
It's a scary story.
It's a scary
You're telling
story.
scary stories together.
Right, yeah. So when you investigate a mysterious object from a room, ask two. Period. Ask two.
Yep.
Period.
No rolling.
No
Yeah.
rolling.
It's
Whose
actually
item?
a colon, but whatever.
Yeah, shut up.
Semantics.
And the questions are, whose item is this? What memory does this item hold? What about this item is odd or uncanny? Why did Bluebeard keep this item? Which are all directly focused towards getting you towards learning that you are in a bad situation.
Right. Right. And then it similarly, take stock. So when you take stock of a tense situation, ask one. And here are the questions that you can ask. Again, no rolling. You take it, you're taking stock. What stalks the bride from the shadows? What traps have been laid for the bride? What does this place demand of the bride? What horror here is hidden from the bride? Again, you could take stock of the situation, like in fucking Masks. That same move is like, what here can I use to win the day? You notice there's none of those kind of questions here, because that's not what this game is about.
Right.
And these kind of question askers are honestly like the bread and butter of what we want to talk about in social systems for other more traditional games.
Right. Because there's nothing, like, a traditional game is welcome to concern itself with rolling in action sequences, I think, because that's where its DNA is from. All traditional games have wargame DNA, period. So it's fine if that system is busy fucking around with the dice, but the social encounters are based on conversations, and I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a lesson from these really directed moves and creating, like, a question asker that you don't have to roll for. I mean, rolling is fun, so maybe you want some sort of power or something that does roll, but, like, the core system doesn't necessarily need it, and that's where I wound up after this tremendous AP. Yeah. Also, I had nightmares.
Oh, so, great. Yeah. That's the mark of a true game right there.
Right. I mean, not about the game, just in general. It, like,
yeah, but it scared you enough to where your brain was like, oh, what if scary things happen?
Right,
like,
yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
A glowing recommendation. So I want to talk a little bit about why I think traditional games structure social systems the way that they do, and then expand on how to marry what I think traditional games are trying to get at as to what a game like Bluebeard's Bride is trying to get at.
Okay.
So, I'm not actually going into the what is it? Game-ness, simulationist.
Oh God, don't do that.
I'm not going into that. GNS, yes, that's what it is.
I don't remember what the N stands for.
I was going to call it GNR, and then I was like, that's not right. So I'm not going into that, but I am going to say that a lot of traditional games, without a doubt, want to simulate something.
Yes.
They are trying to simulate a real life experience through dice, through their mechanics, through whatever. And the more traditional a game is, the more it is trying to simulate a real life experience, in my opinion. whether it's doing it through narrative tricks or dice rolling tricks or whatever else, it is trying to get you to a point where you have simulated what it would be like to be stuck in a dungeon and have to care about food and weight and, carrying capacity and the number of items you can actually physically hold, right? So, when we talk about that in combat, we realize that we can't actually simulate a real combat because, people, unless we're going outside and hitting each other with sticks, that's not a real true simulation. But we can, try to approximate with dice rolling and random chance and skills and all this kind of stuff until our faces are blue. When we talk about social situations, we come into the problem that can be simulated without any mechanics whatsoever, right? Players can literally just talk to each other and have a social situation happen.
Right.
That's the nature of social situations, is that they're just all about talking. And you run into a problem with a lot of social situations where when we're trying to simulate what it's like to be in a social situation, we balk at rolling dice and we balk at gamifying it too hard. There are a few games that attempt a social combat, a literal a literal social combat.
I mean, Exalted 2nd Edition sure did try.
Yeah, and games will try, right? Like, oh, we'll get into a combat. And I mean, like, I fucking wrote one, like, there's one for Requiem because I feel like there is an element there of literally having, a argument with someone and wearing them down and, getting your points across and filibustering and all the things that we do naturally in social situations as our characters, where our characters may be more eloquent or more skilled at that than we dweebs could be. And so, a lot of that is do we think that players will just take care of this on their own? The answer is some will, absolutely. Some won't, because they're just either afraid of it or not very good at it or a myriad of other reasons. And how do we mitigate that to feel like it's really going on, right? And, a game like Bluebeard's Bride isn't actually trying to simulate any kind of social situation. It is just trying to get players into a mindset of this is spoopy and people don't like you and the house is against you and the servants don't necessarily trust you and, all these things. And while everything is an investigation / social situation, you're just doing things. And so asking these questions to drive the story forward is all very descriptive, and it's very, like, it doesn't actually require the players to have a legit conversation with any of the servants or people in the house. So, but traditional games want you to do that. So how do you get to having an actual conversation with the king of the kingdom in which you try to convince him to let your group kill a dragon or whatever in that similar, like, question asking way? Right, because these question askers for social system, for an investigation system as well, there's always that, like, there is a chance of failure. The king may not care, but does there need to be? And I would posit that no, there doesn't need to be a chance of failure in that situation. There is only the price you have to pay to get what you want.
Oh, I dig it. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's really good.
Because I think that a lot of times when we think about social situations, there's not a win-lose situation in that.
Not always.
Not always, right? You may not get what you want, but that doesn't mean you lost.
Yeah, I mean, like, the only time I can think of where there is a clear loser in a social interaction is when one party has so much leverage over the other that the subject or the subject of that leverage cannot really do anything about it and must submit to whatever the person who is blackmailing them or leveraging them so hard is trying to do.
Right.
And in that person is a clear loser. But, like,
yes.
That is a corner case situation.
Well, it's a corner case, but you also have to think about what got you there, right?
Right.
Like, leverage doesn't materialize out of nowhere.
Right, it doesn't come from nowhere.
Right? You either had to have given up stuff to where that person had that kind of leverage over you, which meant you got something before you got into the situation.
Right.
To have that leverage against you. Or that person, by utilizing that leverage, is giving that leverage up. This will probably only work this one time, right? In this way, because now the jig is up. Either you've already used this leverage against me and I am done with you, right? Like now our social dynamic is cut off completely because you have leveraged me so hard, or you've used it up and now you owe me.
Right.
Right. You know, we think about social currencies and social situations, and you think about them in real life. Everything is this kind of give and take where it's like, I want you to do something you don't necessarily want to do. And so now I need to convince you want to do this thing. And I don't do it by browbeating you. I mean, I can, but I am giving something up when I do that. I'm either giving up the respect you have for me, or I'm making concessions to you, or I'm promising to do things for you in the future so that I can get you to do the thing I want you to do right now, unless you're already like inclined to do that thing, at which point it's not really like a persuasion. It's just hey, you want to go get dinner? Yep, hungry. Like, okay, literally that just happens then, right? So, I don't want to commodify social situations in a game because that can start to feel a little gross. Right. Like, well, I'm just going to hand over some gold and then that will happen for me. Like, it has to be like a true risk reward scenario.
Yeah.
For it to not feel gross.
Yeah, that's fair. I also was thinking about these moves and a more traditional game and how you could create moves like these to simply, because sometimes people who play social characters kind of just want to be the person who talks.
Yes.
And I think you could create basically a core set of these directed conversation questions to funnel person who just wants to talk into talking about things that are useful.
Right.
And like, I was trying to think about, and I think we'll do this in our jam for the extended cut.
Yeah.
I was trying to think about like, what kind of questions would those be as core questions that start important or valuable conversations for the person who just fucking wants to talk.
Yeah.
Because like what you said, what I could see from a system like this is both of these things at the same time. Here's a bunch of core questions that simply start important conversations for the player who simply wants to be the person who's chatty.
Yeah.
And then once you're in other situations where you're like dealing with leverage or intimidation or coercion or like what prices are you willing to pay, when it gets a little bit more heavy, then you have these other set of questions for that type of situation. And so you have this like robust set of core things for your social situation that kind of cover all that ground. And you don't really need to randomize any of it.
Nope. In fact, randomizing it could lead to a feeling where people feel incapable or bad about the situation, where it's like, well, I made such a rousing speech and then I had to roll.
Right. I can't tell you how many times I've played a charisma-based D&D character only to roll a 1 on and fail a check on something where I was like, literally, I said everything they wanted to hear. Like,
yeah, and that's interesting because, when you think about that, about certain skill sets and the chance of failure, right? You're always bound to find somebody who you rub the wrong way.
Right.
Or that just isn't susceptible to your charms. But as a person who talks a lot and makes friends easily, right? I really do. Not everybody loves me. I'm not going to try to pretend that that's true. And I probably am very off-putting to certain people, which is very real because I'm loud. And, if you don't like loud people, you probably don't like me. But I find that it's very rare. Well, I will go into a situation and I will say, like, here's a reasonable thing. Here's a thing that I know you want or that I know will please you. And, I am presenting my case to you. And they're just like cold, like hard no, big pass, like buzz off, because that's just not the way people work, right? If I am being presented with something I am interested in mildly by someone who I'm just like okay with, but they've got all the right things, I'm going to entertain their proposition. Like I just am, because that's how people work.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
so having like the hard failure, the big, like the strong no pass on whatever it is you're trying to do is like not a accurate simulation in any way, shape, or form, which then means that, like, do we care about simulation or do we care about, rolling dice?
That is the question, isn't it?
I mean, I like rolling dice.
I also like rolling dice. For heaven's sake, I'm in charge of an more than one Exalted book. I certainly have strong feelings about rolling dice.
Yeah.
And
Same.
how good rolling dice can feel, and especially how good rolling a lot of dice can feel. That's not what we're talking about right now.
No, and and what I like to think about, because I'm really bad at rolling dice. I'm the queen of beefing my rolls.
Beefs the fucking roll.
Yeah, just beefing rolls. And so I like to play games that have mechanics that mitigate my success and failure, that don't depend completely on a random roll. If I'm playing a war game, I will pick the thing that either gives me, more success chance on my dice so that they are less likely to fail me, or I will pick the thing that has a guaranteed effect.
Yeah.
Because this is the way I ensure that even if it's not as powerful, well, it's better than just missing completely.
Right. Because
failing sucks and it hurts and I don't like it. And I do it often enough to where I'm very familiar with it as a concept, as a part of my life. And, I've learned from it, which the thing I've learned from failure is that I don't like it. Not like I think anybody out there is like, oh, I love to fail. I love to try and then have it amount to nothing. It's my kink. Like, okay, that's fine. But also, so, and I think social situations are one of those things where people find frustration in social situations because they do fail. There is failure in social situations, but the way failure looks in a social situation isn't the same as the way failure looks in I mean, it is a little, but we don't simulate it the same, right?
Right.
It is kind of how it looks whenever you fail a combat, right? You don't just die because you failed a combat.
Right.
You may have made strides. You may have injured the other opponent. You may have made some inroads. You just didn't overall get what you wanted out of it. And that's kind of how social situations work too.
Pretty much.
So I don't know why we don't just make social combat the exact same as physical combat, but we don't.
I feel like it's because there's a mental disconnect between the two. Like, people think that those two things are different, and they are, but mechanically they aren't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to wave a sword at you and say, like, do what I want, but, like, if I do, you may still do what I want.
I mean, don't threaten me with a good time.
And now I've broken Monica. Thanks. In case you didn't know, Monica, the thirsty sword lesbian. This is how you break her.
So anyway, we're at like an hour. Was there anything else that we wanted to discuss before we do our bonus segment for our patrons?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've covered kind of the way we feel about this, and I don't know that we were actually trying to come to any kind of like consensus or conclusion on this.
I think we just wanted to talk about it.
Kind of talk about how we feel about social interactions and how we can learn from you can always learn from any game. In fact, you should be reading every game.
You should learn from every game you read.
Yeah, even if the game's not good, just fucking read it. But this game is phenomenal and therefore worth taking lessons from.
So I can't remember if I've ever said this on BXP before, but once at a con I got to go sit in on a panel and listen to Rebecca Sugar talk about writing, which was really cool.
Stuff. Yeah,
really cool. And one of the things they said was, whenever they're stuck and trying to like get the creative juices flowing, they watch a bad movie, because a good movie would just make them wish they had made it. But even bad movies have things in them that are good. And then you can be inspired by the like little nugget of something good in the bad movie.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and I was like, that's so good. That's so like gracious. There's something like really gracious about that And I feel that way about games too, that like, if I read a good game, I just wish I'd made it.
yeah, no, I know. Like, I could just hack this whole thing and just make
Right.
this game, as opposed to like taking a small bit of it and iterating on it.
Yeah.
No,
Anyway.
it's a good idea.
Wisdom from Rebecca Sugar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bless. Anyway. Yeah, so I guess, this opens a conversation. So if your listeners want to get on Discord and continue talking about social systems, I'm willing to keep having this conversation, because I think it's a thing, it's a noodle.
Right.
It's not a we've come to a conclusion.
No, this is a noodle.
It's definitely a noodle. But yeah, let's noodle out a system.
All right.
For bonus content.
Yeah, if you aren't already a patron, you can look us up on Patreon and drop us $1, and then you can find out what we were going to talk about. Because we release extended cuts of all our episodes. You can also hang out with us in a secret room on our Discord.
Secret room.
Just to throw in before we close that Bonus Experience is part of the Misdirected Mark Network. Can you bing for me, please?
Bing.
Thank you. And don't forget that BXP is sponsored by Nerdy Kepi, which has all kinds of really cool Pride swag, including cool-ass masks. And now dresses with pockets.
Dresses with pockets!
And wonderfully loud button-down shirts.
Oh my god, they're so good.
Yeah. So if that appeals to you, you should totally go buy some stuff. Oh, I also have a pair of like cool Doc Marten style boots that have the Buy Pride flag and a floral print on them. They're really fucking cool looking. I get compliments on them from literally everyone when I wear them.
Right, because they're like, they don't realize that they're complimenting the gay. They're tricking everyone into loving gay.
Right. It's very hard to tell that it is the Pride flag colors unless you know they are the Pride flag colors. They're just really cool, pretty floral boots otherwise. And literally people on the street are like, your boots are so fucking cool when I wear them out.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's nerdykepi.com. And if you use promo code BXPcast at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order. Please support a small-owned queer business and us.
Yes.
Danielle, where can they find you if they want to hear you talk about more things?
I am all over the internet, but you can find my website at daniellelauzon.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Impernius, and you can find me on Facebook. Don't find me on Facebook. Nothing but bad takes on Facebook. I also hang out in the BXP Discord. I also hang out in the Onyx Path Publishing Discord. I hang out on Discord probably more than is healthy for me.
That's a quarantine mood.
Oh God.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Zenith Sun. You can also find me as Sister Death Machine on all of those other Twitters. Discords. Fuck.
Discords.
I'm around on the internet. I don't have a website for myself yet, but I probably should. But that's a task for when I have more spoons. So,
or you could be like me and just pay someone to do it for you.
I could do that. That's a pretty good idea. But anyway, remember to change it if you want to.
Yeah.
Do I have to do this? Ugh, fine. Bonus Experience is written and produced by Monica and Ray, and edited by Margaret. Our logo and art is by Nino Studios. Find her on Facebook and Instagram. Our theme song is Reuse Noise with the Light by CDK, and is used under the Attribution Non-Commercial Creative Commons license. BXP is part of the Misdirected Mark Network. I'm not reading this. Fuck it. Bye.